Hello again, everyone. This is Rocket Rick J18, and today we're going to take a look at my 1951 Bowman set. First thing I want to do is let you know that there's an excellent website that you can go to get a more detailed explanation of the sets themselves and the cards in them and how they were produced and so forth. It's called cardboardconnections.com, and I'm going to give you some of the highlights from what they had to say and maybe throw in a few things of my own. So without any further ado, let's take a look at that information. So the 1951 Bowman set started out as black and white photographs that were then colorized by artists, by drawing it in and then transferring that image to be copied and produced on the cards. There are 324 cards in the set, and the cards themselves measure 2 1/16 inches wide by 3 1/8 inches in length. They're slightly longer than the 1949, 48, 49, and 50 Bowman sets. And of course, this is the largest set that Bowman produced, slightly larger than the 55 set, which I believe is in second place. The most notable cards in the set, of course, are the rookie cards of Mickey Mantle, card number 253, and Willie Mays, card number 305. The cards were issued in series, and the high number series includes or begins with Mickey Mantle and concludes with card number 324. They are slightly more difficult to find, although they're not rare in the sense of there's only 5 of them or something like that nature. I mean, there's plenty of them. The winners of the American and National League championships were the New York Yankees and the New York Giants. Giants, of course, won on the strength of Shot World and Yogi Berra for the New York Yankees. A little bit about the backs of the cards. The player's name in red is at the top of the card, and at the bottom of the card is an advertisement for Bowman baseball cards, and includes the number of the particular card. So if you're looking at the Mickey Mantle card, it's going to say number 253 in the 1951 series. The rest of the card, the back of the card, is devoted to a brief biographical information, which includes some statistical data, as well as the brief details of position, batting and throwing, height and weight, place of birth, and date of birth. Most of the cards are printed vertically, although there are 39 cards that are printed horizontally, including both the Mantle and the Mays cards. Although this is the number of cards is the highest that Bowman ever produced, and you might think that they would include, all of the major. So on the first page of the 9 cards per page, we have 4 Hall of Famers, including Whitey Ford, Yogi Berra, and Robin Roberts up at the top. As mentioned before, Yogi was the most valuable player in the American League in 1951. And then in the bottom left-hand corner, we have Gil Hodges of the Brooklyn Dodgers, who is also in the Hall of Fame. A lot of people think that Don Newcombe should be in the Hall of Fame, but as of the present time, he is not. One other notable player to mention, Dale Mitchell, in the middle of the card number 5 in the middle of the page, was the last player to bat in Don Larson's perfect game in 1956. He was then with the Brooklyn Dodgers, and he struck out on a pitch that was questionable, but nevertheless, out he was, and that was the final out, immediately preceding Yogi Berra's joyous leap into the arms of Don Larson, which I think is probably one of the most spontaneous acts of pure joy I think I've ever seen on a baseball field. Another player that's notable there immediately to the left of Dale Mitchell is Del Ennis, who was a superb outfielder for the Phillies, and an integral part of the Whiz Kids 1950 National League champions. So that's page 1. On page 2, we've got several Hall of Famers there, including Red Schoendienst and Eddie Stanky, who I believe is in the Hall of Fame. I'm not really quite sure about that, to be honest. Other notable players are Alvin Dark, who was on the 1951 Giants National League Championship team, later managed the Giants along with a couple of other teams, and also Johnny Pesky right next to him. Johnny Pesky was the shortstop for the Boston Red Sox, and the player whose name was lent to the right field foul pole in Fenway Park, known as Pesky's Pole, because Johnny would, on those occasions where he hit a home run, it was often right down the right field line, which was the shortest path to glory. Moving over to page 3, Phil Rizzuto is the Hall of Famer on page 3, down at the bottom center position. Other players of note, Hank Sauer, who the next year, 1952, was the National League Most Valuable Player. Vic Raschi was a great pitcher for the Yankees during this period of time. Jim Constanti was the most valuable player in the National League in 1950. So he's certainly a notable player. Moving to the next page, in the top left-hand corner, Eddie Waitkus, somewhat better known as the player who was characterized in The Natural. Eddie Stanky was shot and wounded by a woman with some Hello again, everyone. This is Rocket Rick J18, and today we're going to take a look at my 1951 Bowman set. First thing I want to do is let you know that there's an excellent website that you can go to get a more detailed explanation of the sets themselves and the cards in them and how they were produced and so forth. It's called cardboardconnections.com, and I'm going to give you some of the highlights from what they had to say and maybe throw in a few things of my own. So without any further ado, let's take a look at that information. So the 1951 Bowman set started out as black and white photographs that were then colorized by artists, by drawing it in and then transferring that image to be copied and produced on the cards. There are 324 cards in the set, and the cards themselves measure 2 1/16 inches wide by 3 1/8 inches in length. They're slightly longer than the 1949, 48, 49, and 50 Bowman sets. And of course, this is the largest set that Bowman produced, slightly larger than the 55 set, which I believe is in second place. The most notable cards in the set, of course, are the rookie cards of Mickey Mantle, card number 253, and Willie Mays, card number 305. The cards were issued in series, and the high number series includes or begins with Mickey Mantle and concludes with card number 324. They are slightly more difficult to find, although they're not rare in the sense of there's only 5 of them or something like that nature. I mean, there's plenty of them. The winners of the American and National League championships were the New York Yankees and the New York Giants. Giants, of course, won on the strength of Shot World and Yogi Berra for the New York Yankees. A little bit about the backs of the cards. The player's name in red is at the top of the card, and at the bottom of the card is an advertisement for Bowman baseball cards, and includes the number of the particular card. So if you're looking at the Mickey Mantle card, it's going to say number 253 in the 1951 series. The rest of the card, the back of the card, is devoted to a brief biographical information, which includes some statistical data, as well as the brief details of position, batting and throwing, height and weight, place of birth, and date of birth. Most of the cards are printed vertically, although there are 39 cards that are printed horizontally, including both the Mantle and the Mays cards. Although this is the number of cards is the highest that Bowman ever produced, and you might think that they would include, all of the major The next page has a number of common cards on it. No Hall of Famers, no players of remarkable facts. On the next page, we don't have any Hall of Fame players here either. Although Junior Stevens, the Red Sox third baseman, was certainly a key player for the Red Sox during this period of time, although they didn't win any championships or get to the World Series. The next page also no Hall of Famers, but Virgil Trucks, who came over to the Yankees a little bit later in the 50s, was an instrumental pitcher during some of their championship teams. And Andy Pafko, you might recall, is the number one card in the 1952 Topps set. Very difficult card to get in good condition and very expensive. On the next page, again, no Hall of Famers, but several key players, including Allie Reynolds, one of the stalwart pitchers in the rotation for the Yankees. Reynolds pitched 2 no-hitters in 1951. Bobby Brown, who was the third baseman for the Yankees. Curt Simmons, a left-handed pitcher for the Whiz Kids. And Willie Jones, another key player in the Phillies Whiz Kids teams. Joe Garagiola, who was neighbors with Yogi Berra, and famous broadcaster, particularly in the later years of the 70s. Yogi Berra, as I said, was his school chum, and Scout was looking at Joe Garagiola. He reportedly said, "Hey, you ought to be looking at this Yogi Berra. He's a better catcher than I am." Down at the bottom, we have Bill Rigney, who was an infielder for the Giants and later, I think, was the original manager of the Los Angeles Angels. Preacher Rowe, an important pitcher for the Dodgers during this time period. And Bobby Thompson, obviously the guy that hit the shot heard around the world for the New York Giants. Sal Magley was a great pitcher for the Giants during this period of time, along with Ellis Kinder for the Red Sox. Hall of Famer Warren Spahn, the Boston Braves. Matt Batts was a catcher for the Red Sox, and supposedly, according to Ted Williams, was around the batting cage. Williams hit about 8 or 9 vicious line drives to left field, and then turned around in the batter's box to address Matt Batts, and he said, "You see that, Batts? I can hit to left field anytime I want to, but the Red Sox don't pay me to hit to left field." So he continued to ignore the shifts against him and hit with power to right field. Warren Spahn, as you probably already know, the winningest left-handed pitcher in Major League Baseball history with 363 wins, along with countless shutouts and other accolades. Hornspan, I think, hit something like 7 or 8 20 game seasons in a row. Just remarkably consistent. A couple other players on the next page worthy of mention. Fred Hutchinson went on to coach the Cincinnati Reds in the 60s, and Ted Kluszewski, who played for the Pirates and the Reds, famous for his sleeveless shirt with no sleeves underneath the shirt there. Fred Sanford was actually a pitcher for the Yankees. At no time did this particular Fred Sanford ever own a junkyard, unlike pictured on television. Mike Garcia was a 20-game winner for the Indians several times. Larry Doby is a Hall of Famer. Cal Abrams and Rex Barney featured with the pitching staff of the Brooklyn Dodgers during this period of time. Next page has common cards on it, no great superstars. But on the next page, in the third position on the top row, is Ted Williams, who really requires no introduction. Hall of Famer, probably one of, if not the greatest hitter in the history of Major League Baseball. Sam Mealy went on to coach or manage the Minnesota Twins when they moved from Washington in 1960 to Minneapolis. Vic Wertz is going to appear a little later when we look at 1954. Obviously, he was the guy who hit the ball that Willie Mays made his spectacular catch on in the World Series. Vic Wertz was by that time with the Indians. And Mickey Owen, the catcher, who misplayed a called third strike, or a swinging third strike that was not caught, that he didn't catch. And then Henrik went all the way to first base to prolong the World Series in 1947, I believe it was. So Charlie Keller, who appeared on the Yankees during the late 30s, all through the 40s, except for the war years, and on into the 50s. Nickname was King Kong. On the next page, Hall of Fame manager Casey Stengel, up at the top left-hand corner. Also Richie Ashburn, the great center fielder for the Phillies. Other players of note, Hank Bauer, Bobby Avila, and Flip Rosen, Al Rosen, who we mentioned earlier. Peanuts, Billy Hitchcock, Peanuts Lowry, Paul Richards were all notable players for the Phillies and the A's and other teams. Monty Irvin, obvious Hall of Famer with the New York Giants, and featured in both the 1951 and 1954 World Series teams. The next page contains the the rookie card of Vernon Law, a great Pirate pitcher. Billy Southworth was a manager and coach. On the next page, we're looking at some common cards there, mostly common cards. And over on the next page, three Yankees that featured prominently in the '51 set: Joe Page, Ed Lopat. Page was a relief pitcher, Lopat a starter. Brief homage to our friend at Vintage Sanctuary, who is a great Ed Lopat fan, and Gene Woodling, who was an outfielder for the Yankees. Chuck Dressen once famously said about Joe Page that the reason that the Dodgers weren't able to win many world championships against the Yankees could be spelled Page, referring to Joe Page and his penchant for getting Dodgers out late in the games. Also on this page, down in the bottom left-hand corner, Johnny Vandermeer, the only pitcher ever to pitch 2 consecutive no-hitters. Billy Cox was the third baseman for the Brooklyn Dodgers, just soaked up everything that was hit anywhere near him. Very important to the Brooklyn Dodgers. Hall of Fame player Nelson Fox, Nellie Fox down at the bottom left-hand corner, the Chicago White Sox second baseman. Other players of note: Leo DeRocher, who was a manager for the Giants. Bobby Shantz, who won the Most Valuable Player Award in 1952. Jimmy Dykes, who was a coach, manager for the Philadelphia Athletics. And Cloyd Boyer deserves some mention as a pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals and brother of Ken Boyer for the Cardinals and Clete Boyer for the Yankees. Moving on to the next page, we have down at the bottom center position Sam Jethro, Rookie of the Year for the 1949 Boston Braves. Irv Noren came over to the Yankees sometime near this time to play in the outfield for the Yankees, I believe, at least during the 52 and 53 seasons. Moving over to the next page, we have again some common cards. Would make note of a couple of players on this page. At the top, center top position, John Berardino never achieved much fame as a Major League Baseball player, but played Dr. Steve Hardy on the long-running soap opera General Hospital. And I would make note of the fact that the door to his office number, the number of the door to his office was 714, which I noted when noticing that that's the number of home runs, of course, that Babe Ruth hit during his career. So those are his baseball tie-ins. Johnny Klipstein, the pitcher for the Cubs, later played for the Philadelphia Phillies and was a very important relief pitcher for them all the way up through their run at the National League pennant in 1964, where they came up a game short. In the next page, we have one of the two most important cards for the Mickey Mantle rookie card. Since I have this as a graded card, I put the photograph of the card in the slot here, so that's what you see there. But the actual card is right here, which is graded at 2.5. I had this card for a long time in raw form, but I got it graded last year at the National, mostly as an estate planning device to give my wife a head start in putting a value on this, on my baseball card collections, if it ever came necessary to do that. So that's the Mickey Mantle card, and just the back of the card here is in pretty good shape. A little bit of a gum stain near the top, but otherwise decent looking corners. The one card that's kind of a crunched corner bottom, or the bottom right has a little paper loss, and the top left has a little bit of paper loss, but that still was good enough for a 2.5, which I was ecstatic about. So that's Mickey Mantle. Just a little quick story about Luke Easter. Early in his career, he went up to bat, and in his anxiety and the adrenaline flowing, and one of his early at bats, he took a fungo bat up with him instead of a baseball bat, and when he hit a home run, the umpire immediately called him out because it had a distinctive sound to it, and we knew that bat was loaded, but not an intentional thing. Jackie Jensen, next to Mickey Mantle up there. Jackie was afraid of flying, so much so that he wasn't able to play when the Dodgers and the Giants moved out to the West Coast because he just couldn't tolerate the flying. Bertie Tebbetts went on to be a manager with several teams in the 60s. Chuck Dressen, there's a pointing there, managed the Dodgers up until 1950 through the 52 season, but he wanted a pay raise, and Branch Rickey wouldn't give it to him, or at least the front office of the Dodgers wouldn't give it to him. So he went on to coach other teams later in his career, and then the great Dodger pitcher Carl Erskine is down there on the bottom of the second row. Oiskin, as he was known in Brooklynese, was actually from Indiana, and became one of the great friends of Jackie Robinson, and later wrote a book about his experiences in that regard. Moving on to the next page, we've got some, generally speaking, common cards, although Don Mueller with the Giants was an important player in on that team, and worthy of mention. On the next page, Hall of Famer Bucky Harris, manager of the Senators, briefly was manager of the Yankees in the 40s, but he was succeeded by another Hall of Fame manager, Casey Stengel. We looked at his card earlier. Billy Meyer and Danny Murtaugh, very important players, coaches, managers of the Pittsburgh Pirates. I think Danny Murtaugh is probably worthy of being in the Hall of Fame. Maybe one day he'll get there. The next page, we have Hall of Fame manager, player, Frankie Frisch. He was a coach at this time. And other more or less common cards. We do have Hall of Fame coach, player Bill Dickey, who is chiefly responsible for teaching the trade to Yogi Berra after his Hall of Fame career was up. The player next to him, Tommy Henrich, featured very prominently in a book by David Halberstam, which I showed on another channel. It's called The Summer of '49. DiMaggio was hurt the first half of that year, and Henrich hit quite a few home runs, most of which were late in the game to either tie the game or put the Yankees ahead and really keep the Yankees in the pennant race while DiMaggio was out. One of my favorite players from this time period. On the next page, we have a number of more or less common cards, although one card is missing, which I had out to do a player run feature, and that's card number 305, which is the Willie Mays rookie card. If you take a close look at it, you'll notice there are several creases in my copy. Probably would not grade very high. I'm sure would not grade very high. Maybe you'd be lucky to get a 1 or a 1.5, maybe. I don't think much higher than that. That's the Willie Mays rookie card. Jimmy Pearsall down in the bottom right-hand corner of this is featured in his autobiography and the autobiographical or the biographical movie starring Anthony Perkins. The book and the movie both called Fear Strikes Out. Pearsall had some emotional problems and interfered some with his playing career and maybe achieving some greatness there, but unfortunately had those problems. On the next page, we have Johnny Sain down at the the Boston Braves during the '48 season. The siren call for the Braves National League pennant winning team was Spawn and Sain and Pray for Rain, or A Day of Rain, either way. those two pitchers certainly are very prominent on that pennant-winning team. And also worthy of mention, in the second row on the right-hand side, Gene Mauch, not so much for his playing days, but for his work as a manager with the Philadelphia Phillies, Montreal Expos. Mauch gets a lot of heat for his handling of the pitching staff in 1964 coming down the stretch, but the two guys who got him there, Jim Bunning and Chris Short, kind of ran out of gas during the last 12 games, which the Phillies lost 10 of those 12 games, including 10 in a row. And by the time they won the last game, they were already out of the mathematically eliminated from the pennant race. So that's Gene Mauch. I don't think he deserves that much blame, although every Phillies fan will argue that with me. On the next page, which is the final page of the set, Smokey Burgess up there at the top, great pinch hitter and catcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates later in his career, also for the Cincinnati Reds, here pictured with the Chicago White Sox. I'm sorry, Chicago Cubs. And down at the bottom in the center position, also with the Cubs, is Joe Adcock, who was a very prolific long ball hitter, not only for the Cubs here, but later for the Braves, particularly during their pennant-winning and teams of 1957-58. Of course, they won the World Series in '57. Joe Adcock, one of the very few players to hit a ball all the way out in that cutout there in the Polo Grounds, where I think it was 480 feet to dead center field, or at least to the wall, the back wall of that cutout. Anyway, he was a very, very big long ball hitter. So that brings me to the end of the 1957 set. I hope you enjoyed this perusal, and if you enjoyed the look and whatever comments and additions that I made along the way, be sure to like this video, and if you don't subscribe to my channel already, please do that. And in the meantime, this is Rocket Rick J18, wishing that all your collecting dreams come true.